Welcome to another deep dive. So, I want you to picture this. It's 3 in the morning. You're just staring at the ceiling.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. And suddenly, bam, a brilliant connection between two completely unrelated ideas you've been struggling with for weeks just hits you. The concept is like perfectly clear. It feels like a total masterpiece of human cognition.
You've solved everything.
Exactly. So you fall back asleep, completely confident you're going to remember it. But then by breakfast, it is gone.
Completely vanished.
Completely. And you were just left with this hollow, vague sensation that you used to know something important.
Yeah, it is a universally devastating feeling. I mean, anyone who tries to think deeply about a complex problem has experienced that exact morning after amnesia.
It's the worst.
It is. And we tend to internalize it as a personal failure, right? Like a lapse in our own concentration or intellect. But it's actually an architectural flaw in how the human machine operates.
And that architectural flaw is kind of the launching pad for our deep dive today. We're exploring a pretty unconventional source. It's a 2026 release called the Philosopher's Zettelkasten, a pocket dictionary.
By Edmund Gröpl.
Yes, Edmund Gröpl. And our mission today is to, well, look at how we can save those fleeting 3 a.m. thoughts from oblivion using a surprisingly analog system.
Very analog.
Yeah.
Right.
And then from there, we're going to follow Gröpl into his deeply unsettling examination of what happens when we try to outrun our own biological memory by outsourcing our thinking to artificial intelligence.
Which is where it gets a bit scary. But, first, the format of this source is immediately striking. Gröpl didn't write a traditional narrative book. He wrote a literal dictionary.
Right, A to Z.
Yeah, and he argues, quite provocatively, that a dictionary is the most honest literary form there is. I mean, think about a novel. It dissembles, right? It hides its true assertions about the human condition behind the artifice of a plotted story.
Sure, or like a modern business book.
No. Oh, exactly. A standard philosophical treatise or a business book will build this massive mountain of syllogisms and case studies and appendices just to bury one single useful insight somewhere in chapter 4.
Just desperately hoping you won't notice how much scaffolding was required for one tiny idea.
Right. But a dictionary, it bravely uses alphabetical order. It just says, here's a word, here's what it means, here's why it matters.
It strips away all the pretense, which is exactly what we need when confronting the central problem here, the absolute fragility of human memory. I love this analogy he uses. He describes human memory as a city immediately after a moderate earthquake.
It is a painfully accurate image, isn't it?
It really is. Much of the city is still standing, but a lot has collapsed. And there is just considerable confusion on the ground about which is which.
Yeah, you can remember with crystal clarity some social faux pas you made at a dinner party a decade ago.
Oh, every night before I go to sleep.
Right. But you cannot recall the core argument of a book you spent 2 weeks reading and passionately highlighting just last month.
Totally. And Gröpl points out that this isn't a moral failing on our part. I mean, the human mind was evolutionarily optimized to avoid large predators, secure food, navigate tribal social dynamics.
Which it is exceptionally good at.
Extremely. But it was absolutely not designed for the reliable long-term filing of abstract concepts.
No, definitely not. And to cure this condition, Gröpl points to the Zettelkasten.
The slip box.
Right. For those unfamiliar, it's a German word that translates to slip box. It's essentially a system of small index cards kept in a physical box.
This literal paper card.
Literally. Every time you have a thought or you read an insight, you write it down on one of these cards. But crucially, you write just one thought per card. Then you place it in the box and you deliberately connect it to other cards using this very specific threading system.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because having a thought is like catching lightning in a jar, right?
Yeah.
But the Zettelkasten is like wiring all those jars together to actually power a house. Let's talk about how that threading works.
Well, it's not alphabetical, and it's not categorized by broad topics like science or history because Gröpl says broad topics become dead ends.
Right.
It uses an alphanumeric branching system. So say you have card 1. Maybe it's a thought about architecture. The next totally new thought you have about architecture is card 2.
Okay.
But later, you have a thought that relates specifically to a detail on card 1, but it isn't a brand new thought, so you label it 1A. You put it right behind card 1. And if you have a thought expanding on 1A, it becomes 1A1.
Ah, I see. So if a standard digital folder is like a parking garage where thoughts just pull in, park, and sit there in isolation, the Zettelkasten is more like a chemistry set.
That's a great way to put it.
You're taking idea A, assigning it a number, putting it into a beaker with idea B just to see if they react and create a
Yeah.
totally new comp.
Exactly. You're building an external network of your own mind, infinite branches of thought. The sociologist Nicholas Luhmann is actually the most famous practitioner of this.
Oh, yeah, the 90,000 cards guy.
Yes. He built a Zettelkasten of 90,000 index cards over his lifetime. He didn't just store information, He used those branches to generate ideas. So when it came time to write a book, he didn't stare at a blank page.
He already had the outline.
He simply pulled a thread of connected cards, maybe starting at 4A, following the branches down to 4A, 6B, and transcribed the conversation he had already had with himself over the years.
That's incredible.
He produced a volume of academic work that would have taken several ordinary lifetimes, and he literally credited the box as his co-author.
Okay, but wait. I'm stuck on this physical box idea because it is 2026. I have a terabyte of cloud storage in my pocket. I have AI search tools that can instantly find any word I've ever typed.
Right, why go analog?
Yeah, why on earth would I waste time writing on pieces of cardboard and manually organizing them with numbers? It just seems incredibly inefficient.
What's fascinating here is that the inefficiency is actually the entire point. Yeah. Gröpl addresses this through a concept he calls German thoroughness. In this tradition, thinking is not viewed as a sudden flash of divine inspiration. Thinking is a daily physical discipline.
Okay.
The reason the physical format matters is because of the friction it creates. Think about what happens when you highlight a PDF or copy-paste a paragraph into a digital app.
You just click a button.
Exactly. You haven't actually thought about it. The app stored it, but your brain completely bypassed the processing phase.
Oh, wow. It's frictionless capture.
Yeah.
I saved it, therefore I feel like I learned it, but I actually just hoarded it.
Precisely. You're just hoarding. The physical friction of writing a single thought on a very limited physical space forces you to digest the idea. You have to translate the author's words into your own vocabulary to make it fit on a 3x5 card.
Because you can't fit a whole page on there.
Right. And you have to actively decide where it belongs in your alphanumeric web. That friction guarantees that comprehension has actually taken place.
So that physical constraint leads directly into Gröpl's concept of smallness, right? Which refers to the shape of the thoughts themselves.
Yes, smallness.
Because he argues that smallness is not a lack of ambition. It's a profound philosophical position. He points to works that have survived centuries, like Blaise Pascal's Pensée.
Right, the 17th century mathematician.
Yeah, and his most famous work is essentially a collection of fragmented, concise notes. They survived precisely because they are modular, self-contained thoughts, rather than being buried on page 600 of some dense treatise.
Exactly. Gröpl says the greatest intellectual errors humanity has made are usually errors of scale.
Trying to do too much.
Yes, the grand sweeping theory that tries to explain absolutely everything and refuses to admit any exceptions is doomed to collapse. But the index card prevents you from building a fragile tower. Because it's physically small, it forces a severe constraint on the writer.
An idea on an index card has to stand entirely on its own. It strips away what Gröpl calls anxious padding.
Oh, the anxious padding.
We all know what that looks like. It's that elaborate, convoluted academic language, or those endless qualifying sentences we use when we aren't actually sure what we're talking about.
Or when we're afraid of being criticized.
Exactly. We hide our weak arguments in long paragraphs. But the index card just eliminates the physical space for your anxiety to hide. To write on an index card is to commit.
To commit. And when you fill a box with these commitments over years and you start linking them together, you are eventually forced to discover what it is you actually believe. It strips away all the aesthetic postures we adopt.
That's a scary thought.
It is. I mean, if you had to sit down today and write your absolute core beliefs on a stack of index cards, one per card, how many of them would actually survive the lack of padding?
Probably not as many as we'd like to think. It is a profoundly confronting exercise.
Absolutely.
So, if this physical box is the ultimate tool to manage human memory by forcing us to slow down and commit, well, we are currently living through the exact opposite trend.
We certainly are.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because we are building tools designed to bypass human thinking altogether. This is where Gröpl pivots from extending human memory to the deeply uncomfortable reality of artificial intelligence.
Right. And he notes that humans have always built tools to extend our physical capacities, and we've always experienced brief periods of panic about them. We built the hammer to extend the arm, the wheel to extend the leg, the telescope to extend the eye.
Yeah.
Each caused some initial alarm, which faded into indifference once the tool became ordinary. But the existential alarm surrounding AI isn't fading.
No, it's growing.
Because, as Gröpl points out, a telescope doesn't build better telescopes. A book doesn't write other books. This new tool is entirely different because it looks back at us.
But before we can even assess the threat, Gröpl insists we have to define what intelligence actually is. Because we tend to fall into the trap of thinking about intelligence as a single, unified slider, right? Like the volume knob on a radio. You're either low intelligence, medium, or high.
Which is fundamentally flawed. Gröpl defines intelligence not as a monolith, but as a coalition of related capacities.
A coalition.
Right. There is the capacity to recognize patterns. There is the capacity to produce and understand language. There's the capacity for social navigation, understanding the nuance between what someone says and what they actually mean.
Which is huge.
And there is the capacity for a theory of mind, knowing that you are an independent entity that thinks.
And the proof that these are separate capacities is everywhere. We all know brilliant software engineers who cannot navigate the subtext of a simple dinner party conversation.
Yes.
And we know highly charismatic, socially masterful people who can't grasp basic statistical patterns.
Exactly. These aren't failures of a unified intelligence. They are proof that the coalition of capacities can have internal disagreements. So asking, is the machine intelligent, is just the wrong question entirely.
Right. The real question is, which of these capacities does the machine possess, and to what degree?
And the capacity that is causing the most disruption right now is language. The current generation of large language models produces text with a fluency that is just staggering. They can argue, summarize, translate, synthesize complex ideas across entirely different domains.
That's wild.
It is. Which forces us to ask, does speaking equate to thinking?
Well, this brings us to Alan Turing's basic premise from the 1950s, the Turing test. He argued that if a machine behaves indistinguishably from a thinking entity, if it fools you into believing you're talking to a human, then it is functionally thinking.
Right.
But then you have John Searle's famous Chinese room counter-argument. Searle said that if you put a man in a room with a rule book and he just translates Chinese symbols based on those rules without actually understanding a word of the language, he isn't thinking.
He's just blindly manipulating symbols.
Exactly. To the outside world, he appears fluent, but inside there is zero comprehension.
And Gröpl applies this exact debate to modern AI. But he notes how uncomfortable the Chinese room argument has become, because the machine is essentially in that room manipulating symbols based on mathematical weights.
But wait, let me push back on that.
Yeah.
If this AI is taking a highly abstract concept from quantum physics and accurately analogizing it to 19th century French poetry, two domains it was never explicitly programmed to connect, isn't it kind of outgrowing that Chinese room rule book?
That is the exact irritant Gröpl is trying to scratch.
Because at a certain point, when the pattern matching becomes that deeply sophisticated, doesn't it become functionally identical to understanding?
Well, we simply do not know if there is anyone home inside the machine. The engineers who built the models don't know, and the philosophers don't know. So to bridge this gap, Gröpl offers a brilliant synthesis. He tells us to view the AI not as an alien mind, but as a mirror.
A mirror reflecting our own aggregated output.
Exactly. Look at how these models are trained. They have ingested essentially everything the human race has ever written down and digitized. The grand philosophical texts, the cutting-edge science, the poetry, the angry forum posts, the biased historical accounts, the mundane shopping lists.
All of it.
All of it. When you ask the machine a question, you are not speaking to an independent intelligence. You are speaking to the aggregated verbal output of our entire species.
So when the machine exhibits a massive bias, or when it has a glaring blind spot, or when it speaks with just arrogant fluency about a topic, it is completely wrong about it.
Yes.
It isn't behaving like a rogue alien. It's behaving exactly like us. Its flaws are simply our human flaws, aggregated, automated, and fired back at us at an unprecedented scale.
It reflects the literate more than the illiterate, the published more than the private, the present more than the past. Mirrors are rarely comfortable to look into when you've been away from them for a long time.
That is so true.
And we are currently staring into the aggregated reflection of our own collective psyche.
And that mirror concept fundamentally changes how we view creativity, too, because we used to comfort ourselves with this very specific narrative. We said, sure, a machine can diagnose a disease faster than a doctor, or beat a grandmaster at chess. But it can never write a moving poem. It can never paint a masterpiece.
Because true art requires suffering.
Right. It requires a biological life lived.
It was a deeply comforting argument, and it fell apart remarkably quickly when confronted with the actual output of these models.
Because the machine does write moving poems. It generates beautiful, haunting images that evoke real emotional responses in humans. And Gröpl poses a question here that completely stops you in your tracks.
Oh, this part is brilliant.
He asks, if a poem generated by a machine moves you to tears, but absolutely no one suffered to write it, does that mean our historical love of art was actually just our love of the story behind the artist?
Wow.
Like, were we merely reacting to the mythology of the starving, suffering creator rather than the intrinsic value of the art object itself?
It forces us to ask how much of meaning-making resides in the creator and how much is merely projected by the audience. If the audience brings all the emotion, the machine only needs to provide the scaffolding.
Right.
And this transitions directly into the most dangerous aspect of how the machine generates its output. Gröpl points out that the machine does not lie.
Hold on, it definitely produces false information. We see it hallucinate legal cases and historical facts constantly.
Oh, it absolutely produces false information. But lying implies an intent to deceive. A human liar knows the truth, deliberately conceals it, and hopes you believe the falsehood.
Right, there's a motive.
Exactly. To understand why the machine doesn't lie, we have to look at the mechanics of what is actually happening under the hood. A large language model doesn't know facts in a database sense. It uses probabilistic token generation.
Meaning it's essentially just a highly advanced autocomplete.
Precisely. When you ask it a question, it is calculating the statistical likelihood of the next word, or token, based on its training data. If you say, the sky is, it predicts blue because that is mathematically probable.
Okay.
When it invents a historical event that never happened, it isn't trying to trick you. It has simply calculated that a certain string of historical-sounding words is statistically likely to follow your prompt. It is doing math, not deception. Therefore, it is confabulating, not lying.
And because it is just doing math, it confabulates with the exact same confident, grammatically perfect, authoritative tone that it uses when it is stating absolute verifiable facts. The math doesn't care if the output is true. It only cares if it fits the pattern.
That lack of intent removes any moral agency from the machine. But it creates a massive crisis of epistemology for us. It is a failure of verification, not a failure of morals.
That is a terrifying implication for the listener. I mean, think about how we have historically spotted bad information on the internet. We relied on heuristics, we looked for poor grammar, weird formatting, obvious ignorance, or just a manic, crazy tone.
The tells.
Yeah, we relied on the tells of a crank. But the machine has completely erased those tells. It replaces that useful heuristic with absolutely nothing. A completely fabricated hallucinatory event will be written with the same elegant, polished prose as the actual history of the Roman Empire.
Which means the entire burden of discernment is now resting solely on your shoulders. You can no longer rely on the packaging of the information to judge its validity.
You have to be infinitely vigilant.
Yes, verifying the substance of every claim. And we cannot pressure the machine into honesty because there is no hidden conscience to appeal to.
But if we accept that the machine has no conscience, no intent, and cannot tell truth from fiction, it forces us to confront a much more uncomfortable question about what is actually happening inside its mind.
The big question.
Right. Is there an inner life to this thing at all? Gröpl actually tackles the theological question. Does the machine have a soul?
It seems like a radical departure for a practical dictionary, but his handling of it is profound. He openly admits he is not a theologian, and he personally doubts the machine possesses any kind of divine spark or conscious inner life.
What?
But he warns us to look very closely at our own history. Historically, whenever human beings have confidently declared that a specific entity lacks a soul, it has been used as a convenient excuse to deny moral consideration to that entity.
That's dark. We denied the soul to animals for centuries to justify how we treated them in agriculture and science.
Exactly.
Human beings have routinely denied the soul to marginalized groups of other humans to justify slavery, colonization, and atrocities.
So Gröpl is warning us not to express what he calls unearned certainty about the inner life of these machines. Are we declaring they have no internal experience just because it is economically and psychologically convenient for us to treat them as mere tools?
It's easier that way.
Much easier. If a machine can suffer, it deserves moral consideration. If it truly cannot suffer, we need to be absolutely sure of that based on a deep understanding of consciousness, not just because we want free labor.
So what does this all mean? Gröpl wraps up this dictionary with an ultimate warning about how we navigate this new reality. He says we shouldn't mindlessly oscillate between two panics. First, don't panic that AI is just a cheap trick, a glorified autocomplete that will eventually hit a wall.
Right.
But equally, don't panic that it is a new omnipotent God that is going to inevitably supersede humanity. Both of those extreme panics are just simple, lazy stories we tell ourselves to avoid doing the real work.
And the real work is maintaining our own capacity to judge, to reason, and to think independently. The ultimate danger Gröpl sees isn't a sci-fi scenario where the machine takes over the world by violent force.
A Terminator scenario.
Right. The real danger is far quieter. The danger is that we will gladly, willingly outsource our judgment to it because it is just easier.
Letting an AI do your thinking for you isn't mind extension, it's mind atrophy. If you let someone else walk for you every single day, you are extending your legs. Your muscles will simply stop working.
Exactly.
If we outsource the research, the synthesis, the first draft, and the considered view to a machine, we will eventually forget how to recognize its errors. We will lose the friction required to formulate our own beliefs.
Gröpl's final entry in the dictionary is chilling, but just brilliant in its brevity. He writes, "The machine is waiting for your next question. Try to have a good one."
Oh, that's so good. It puts the responsibility right back on us to cultivate our own minds. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, connecting the two halves of our deep dive today. If human memory is that chaotic, post-earthquake city full of collapsed buildings and weird, accidental connections,
And AI is this frictionless, perfectly organized confabulator.
with absolutely no inner life. Maybe the flaws in our biological memory aren't actually flaws. Maybe the deliberate friction of writing on a small index card, the struggle to connect idea A to idea B, the exact chaotic things we try to fix with note-taking systems, maybe that friction is the secret ingredient.
The thing that makes us human.
Yeah. Maybe that architectural failure of the human mind is the exact mechanism that makes genuine human creativity and meaning possible in the first place. Think about that the next time you are tempted to ask a machine to seamlessly generate your thoughts for you.